Welcome to Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on our podcast who has an idea we haven't discussed in this sense before. We talk a lot about election reform on this podcast, and we talk about reforming the voting process. And this person has a radical view about voting altogether, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it. The cause of which he represents is called Don't Vote, and his name is Darren Wolf. So welcome to the podcast, Darren.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Darren, if we could get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Yes, I used to be with the Libertarian Party. At one time, I was the Eastern Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania. Before that, I was County Chair. And so, in the way you could say, I saw how the sausage was made. As far as political activism goes, I have been active with End the Fed, things like that. Since then, also been active for gun rights. And something else that did really have a significant impact on me as far as voting goes, I lived in Venezuela for 7 years. I was there when they elected Hugo Chavez.
Oh, my.
So if you want to talk about democracy failing, I think there's hardly a better example than that.
Huh. Wow. So Venezuela, so you don't believe in democracy. A lot of people that I've run across are very dogmatic about democracy. I would say the vast majority of people I meet, whether they're politically active or not, we have the condition that democracy is an inherent good thing, so you want as much democracy as possible. So would you say then that because of your experience in Venezuela and otherwise, that democracy is not always an inherently good thing?
Well, that is correct, and I think that does mirror some of the thinking of the American founders who were very leery of actual democracy. But also, I look at it this way. In running a government, you have taxation and you have elections and you have voting.
Uh-huh.
And if we start from the premise as libertarians, I don't know if you're a libertarian, but anyways, as a libertarian, I start from the premise that taxation is theft. So you're starting from an immoral premise right there. Now, to try to legitimize it, they do elections. They have people vote. And the elections are the great legitimizer.
Uh-huh.
This is where I think even libertarians who say, well, we need smaller government, kind of don't really understand their principles. It just doesn't work because you don't have control of the money. They give you this, oh, you can vote, you can control by voting, but you don't. You can't tell the IRS, well, I don't believe in this or that and the other thing that the government wants to spend money on, so I'm not going to pay tax for that. It doesn't work that way. Not even close. And I've known the people that have fought about taxes and gone to prison for it. So I see that democracy and voting and elections and all of that, they are not a way that people control the government. They are actually a way that the government controls the people.
Wow.
You see.
Wow.
And, but I think the greatest democracy you can have is the marketplace. If you can choose where to spend your money, then, hey, you have, what more democracy what could be more democratic? What could be more fair? I don't know, moral. So instead of trying to replace market transactions for what are traditionally government services with voting and elections, I say put these things on the market and let people choose who they want to have deliver these services and how much to pay and things like that.
Okay. Interesting. Are you familiar with Joe Biafra?
Could you say that again?
Are you familiar with Joe Biafra, the activist punk singer?
No, I'm not.
Okay. He talks about something he calls where, like a line item voting, where you can vote for, he would recommend you can vote for different things. And it sounds like you're arguing that voting is very, very broad when what we would need is a very granular voting thing. And so thus, we don't have much control over the government process. And Joe Biafra was talking about how that he wanted us to vote for everything, about how we could choose tax dollars individually. As of now, you put the tax money in and it goes wherever they say it goes. But he could say if you want it to go $5 there, it could go $5 there. He said a lot of people would want to fund education, but not the military and stuff like that. So that sounds familiar to what he was advocating.
Well, I suppose that would be an improvement over what we have now. My major concern is that you're still going to have taxation, and you're still going to have a government that can manipulate how people are educated, or some would say indoctrinated, and can manipulate the media to propagandize people. Because that's what we see that now, that the elections are much more what the government or the elites or the establishment, whatever you want to call them, the deep state, I don't know. The point is, it's what they can manipulate people into voting for, rather than the people actually saying, this is our will, as if there could be such a thing as a collective will.
Okay.
So maybe that would be less bad, at least for a while, but it's still voting and it's still taxation. And I just don't see that as like a real permanent solution.
Okay. So are you advocating anarchism?
Yes.
Oh my.
Or voluntarism, or however you want to put it. Anarchism, voluntarism, and anarcho-capitalism, sometimes people call it.
Okay. Wow. I've interviewed a lot of Libertarian Party members on the podcast, and they will take it very far. Most of them don't come right out and advocate for anarchism. So we appreciate your viewpoint. It's something different than what we had before, and we've already had a lot of people on this podcast. So that's interesting. So how do we change this from what we have right now to where we don't have the voting mechanism in place?
It starts in people's minds. It's nothing will change without changing people's minds. And I don't have it in front of me, but there's a quote from, I'm pretty sure it's James Madison, where he talked about the American Revolution happened in the hearts and minds of the people. It was from there that we had the American War. And this is exactly the same idea. Not that I'm an advocate of violence. I don't want to make sure there's no mistake there. He said that they had to get people's minds changed and understanding how the crown was abusing them, then people would turn against it. And it's the same thing with the American government, which many say is actually treating us worse now than the British crown was treating the colonists back when.
Oh, yes.
Get people to understand this, that, we are not free. This is not, some kind of paradise here, though I certainly will admit, after having lived in a third world country, there's much to be said for the U.S., but we're also losing that. But anyway, we need to get people to understand what they're actually doing, then we can change this. The actual nuts and bolts of how we're going to change it, what's going to end first, and what other things will start up first and second and third, there's no way to know. And who knows? We might just have to wait for the system to collapse, and that might be in 200 years, who knows? And then we can start over. Who knows how it's going to be? Or it might be a peaceful transition if people start to wake up and think more like I do. Who knows? Who knows?
Okay. So if we don't know how it's going to change, does that mean that we can't do anything to expedite the process?
My attitude is to educate people. We've got to get the word out, got to get the message out, and we got to do what we can to change people's minds. It's a difficult process. It may not succeed. I think people that think like me are a very small minority. I think there are more people that are libertarians, like small government or minarchists. I'm sure you've heard that term.
Yes. Yeah. Can you please explain that to our audience?
Oh, the minarchists are people who believe in a minimal government, mostly there to back up private institutions.
Okay.
The government would be like the last resort. And like you'd have a private legal system, but that private legal system would rely for enforcement on the government. If all else fails, then you go to the government courts.
Oh, okay.
Well, we have something like that now in arbitration. A lot of contracts call for arbitration. I mean, you
Oh,
have
okay.
a glimpse of that kind of thing. But if arbitration fails, then you go to court. Yeah.
Okay. So how is that exactly different than libertarianism in general? Because libertarianism in general is all about reducing government to the smallest size possible, right?
Well, I look at libertarian as an umbrella. I mean, you can be a classical liberal, a minarchist, or an anarchist. You'd still call yourself a libertarian.
Okay.
Though I do think that, and I'm going to keep harping on the same subject because to me it's, follow the money. If you're an advocate of forcible taxation, you're not really advocating libertarianism, as far as I'm
Huh.
concerned. Now, you might want to be a libertarian who's going to get elected, and you're going to be part of a government that taxes, and I can understand that. But if you're saying no, we need some taxes, but I'm a libertarian, I'm a little like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
Huh.
Now, people have suggested voluntary forms of government. I think Ayn Rand was big on the idea of contracts would have to be registered for a fee, and that would be a voluntary thing because you could choose to have a contract without registering it and things like that. But, I still say that you can't initiate the use of force, and that's the key to libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. But
Okay.
everything you do has to be consistent with non-aggression. As soon as you want to enforce taxes on people who didn't sign anything that says that they agreed to pay them, well, there you go. That's aggression.
Okay, so you see most libertarians are going to accept some level of taxation, you think?
Well, I don't know. I'm not. That's hard to say because I know all kinds of libertarians who think we should have a government, but they are willing to go out and fight against taxes. Some of the guys that I was with in my libertarian party days, there were a couple of guys who were not paying taxes. One of them was the treasurer. He was a very honest guy. One of them was the treasurer of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania at that time, and he didn't pay taxes.
Oh, wow.
So to me, it's not a question of integrity. He didn't pay taxes, but just the opposite. His integrity led him not to. Problem
For
is,
sure.
he went to federal prison.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. That's bad, And there was another guy who was had a great career going. I don't want to reveal too much about these guys. I already revealed
Fair
the
enough.
treasurer of B, but had a great career going and all that. And he was into this. Ended up he lost his job, went to the federal prison. I think he lost his wife too, if I remember right. It's like I can see why people pay taxes. I pay taxes. I want to be clear about that. I don't want anybody knocking on my door. But just like when a mugger on the street stuck a gun in my face and said, "Give me your money," I gave him the money. I pay taxes. Doesn't mean I
Oh, no,
agree
you're
with him.
mugged? You're mugged by somebody?
Oh yeah.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. It happens. At this point, it happened probably over 40 years. Yeah, it was over 40 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I sound
Okay.
younger than I am, people tell me, so I know. Happened a long time
Oh,
ago, but nobody got
okay.
hurt, so, the guy just wanted money and left, so. Yeah. What are you gonna
Okay.
do?
Okay. I got a couple years ago, a couple guys took my stuff and I did what they say you shouldn't do. I chased them for it. I grabbed it back from them and then I got it back, everything back, and they ran away.
Wow. Hey, that's
Yep.
good. Congratulations. But yeah, you got lucky too, that
Yeah.
they didn't whip out weapons and do anything to you.
They did some physical stuff, but they were pretty scrawny. So if they were bigger, I may have chosen a different ploy. So
Yeah.
yes. So yeah, I understand what it's like to be mugged. So It's not fun.
No, it's not
So,
fun.
yeah, so you're comparing that to what the government does, where it's more of a subtle way, you would say, right?
Well, they dress it up, they dress it up and try to make it sound nice, and they make up all kinds of nonsense about voluntarily paying taxes, but they're really just putting a gold plating on a piece of crap. It's in the end, if you don't pay, if you resist them enough, they'll even go to the extreme of killing you. You know, like if you refuse to go to prison, you start shooting it out with them when they come to take you away or something like that. They'll kill you. So, yeah, and then there's all these other things that and not just things like drug laws, or laws against gambling and other vices, but you have regulations, zoning laws, these things that they impose on people.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice to say, I will do that, I won't do that, They say, no, this is how you're going to build your house, this is how you're going to do this in the neighborhood, whatever. All of these things are imposed on us, and it's even, I know they're not drafting people into the military, but they are registering people for the draft. They were talking
Okay.
about doing it automatically recently. All of these things
Uh-huh.
are imposed. Draft is imposed on you.
So, in regards to not voting, do you think that the boycott of voting is going to cause? Do you do it more as a principled stand, or do you think it's going to have an effect on the system if everyone or a lot of people refrain from voting?
I do think it'll have an effect if we can get the ball rolling here, and a lot of people don't vote already for whatever their reasons. But I don't agree with the use of the word boycott. I'm not advocating a boycott because that suggests that you would go back to voting later.
Huh.
You're boycotting the election because of, X reason. No, this is a rejection of the system, and it is on principle. And I do think that if we can get people to stop voting and believing in the idea that elections legitimize government, then we can move on towards reforms away from government. I mean, we may not reach the perfect anarchist system that I dream of, but we can certainly move in that direction. But it's going to take people disengaging their minds from the government. They have to stop identifying with it. And, I voted my government or whatever they think.
Okay. So what do you think about the option that some people want is none of the above? Do you think that is still playing into the system, or do you think there's something valuable about that?
Well, it certainly would be a good way to get, if you could get anarchists to vote none of the above and, none of the offices are filled, that would be beautiful. I have a hard time with the idea that the system would accept that and that, very many people would. So like if you have your representative in Congress and everybody votes none of the above, are they really just going to leave that office empty? Some people have said if none of the above wins, then you have another election. I think they're going to find a way to fill that office.
Oh, okay.
I
So you
don't
don't see that
believe
as a
for a
solution.
minute I don't believe for 1 minute that they're going to leave these offices empty, especially if they see a none of the above movement really gaining ground, and there's, if 25% of the seats in the House of Representatives are empty. I mean, they're gonna cut that off one way or another. They're gonna cut that off.
Yeah, good. That's an interesting perspective, sure.
Well, look, the only reason we have elections now is because it benefits the elite in the country. If it didn't, we wouldn't have them.
Oh, wow.
To me, this is completely unmistakable, very clear. They do, all the emphasis that they place on elections is because elections benefit them. Doesn't benefit, we the people. It benefits the elites.
Okay.
In all countries.
So would elections be worse than having an overt dictatorship?
Well, it depends on what you mean by dictatorship and elections, because dictatorships have elections too. I mean, they have elections in Cuba. They have an opposition party, never wins, but they go through the motions of elections.
Okay.
Yet they're a dictatorship. And then again, it was Thomas Jefferson. He wrote in, I think, Notes on Virginia, he said, an elective dictatorship is not the government we fought for. And I may not get that quote exactly right, but this is the basic idea was you can have an elected dictatorship. But
Okay.
if you're asking me, like, would I rather have a military junta over an elected government? You know, most of the time elected governments are less bad than the juntas, but then again, you know, I'm sure you've heard it before, right? People have said, well, Hitler came to power through an electoral system,
Yep. True.
you know, and so did Hugo Chavez, for that matter. You know,
So
so I don't know.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So some would say that the electoral system, the representative democracies, can be self-defeating because if you elect a dictatorship, you can elect a dictatorship, then it's self-suicidal, but the system can destroy itself.
Well, yeah. Okay. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's easy to get people to vote for more and more government. You know, if people can start voting themselves benefits, even voting themselves money, they're going to start voting for that stuff. And that's, you know, the bigger the government gets, the less liberty we have. It's hard to get people to vote for less government. You know, for every one time somebody will vote for less government, like there's like, I don't know, 100 times, 1,000, whatever times people will vote for more government.
Sounds good. Interesting perspective. So Darren, how can our audience support you in your efforts?
Well, that's a good question. I would say read up on things that different people have written, like Lysander Spooner is
Okay.
great. His Constitution of No Authority, I think, has had a profound influence on me. And so at this point, really, there's not really an organization out there particularly doing anything that I'm a part of.
Okay.
You know, now an organization that I mean, not say anything, but yeah, I would say educate yourself. I mean, you have our group on Facebook. We can certainly talk there, and there are many different anarchist authors out there that you can read up on.
Okay. Sounds good. So besides Facebook, are you on any other social media?
No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay, Darren, we thank you for coming on the podcast today and talking about your original idea, something we haven't talked about in the same way before in this podcast. We thank you for adding something new to the podcast we didn't have before.
Well, thank you for not hanging up on me.
Oh,
And
sure thing.
thanks for having me. I'm just kidding. Some people just want to cut me right off.
Oh,
But
no.
thank you for having me on and for having this discussion. It was good to talk to you, Andrew.
Yes, take care and all the best in everything you do.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye now.
Have a good. Bye bye.